mata ka isi aga n'ala anyị bụ Nigeria ọbụla dị na mba ofesi. Oge ndị Igbo na Voice of the People Television ga na-abịara gị site n'ụbọchị Monday ruo Friday na SLTV Channel 264. Ekwekwala ka akọrọ gị ya akọrọ. Chetakwa na ọ bụ na SLTV Channel 264 ka ị ga-ekiri Voice of the People Television. Voice of the People Television, ugbu a iwere karịa olu.
Welcome to today's edition of the Issues on Voice of the People TV. And so much to look forward to as we take a look at Buhari's legacy and talking about aftermath as well as APC and looking at so many issues that have gone down as far as critical looking at what has happened to Nigeria 8 years after Buhari.
In a world where truth is the ultimate power and opinions scream the loudest, it's time to wade through the noise.
Hunger no get tribe! Hunger no get religion!
And scan the human interest and trending topics that matter. Stay tuned to The Issues, your plug to the stories making the buzz, from politics to science and technology, social justice, and more. Let's tackle the tough questions and expose the truth. The Issues on Voice of the People Television. Don't just react, understand.
Welcome back to The Issues on Voice of the People TV, where we don't run from uncomfortable truth. We chase them down. Tonight, we'll open a file marked national shame, because somewhere between 2007 and 2015, Nigeria's economy grew from $278 billion to $568 billion. But by 2025, that same economy has crashed to $199 billion, a full-blown economic nosedive. Who crashed the plane? Who disabled the black box? And more importantly, why are millions of Nigerians still defending the pilot? Joining me is one of the most fearless investigative voices on the African continent, a man banned in some places, revered in others, the author of The Jungle, David Hundeyin. And with me, one of Nigeria's sharpest minds in political commentary, best-selling author of Understanding Power Games in Nigeria, Peter Anosike. Dr. Peter Anosike is a philosopher, development economist, and best-selling author. I advise that you get your seatbelt, because tonight we're not just asking what happened to the Naira, we're asking what happened to the Nigerian mind. After this short break, we'll dig deeper into this topic some more. Don't go away. Welcome back. Let's dive straight into today's discussion. The death of former President Muhammadu Buhari, Nigeria's second president to rule the country as a military head of state and a civilian president, stirred a spectrum of emotions, from mourning to criticism of the legacy he left behind. Buhari will go down in history as the president who contested for the keenly contested seat and Aso Rock 4 times before clinching the position. The former president is peculiar governance style, often perceived by Nigerians as slow, and him the nickname Baba Go Slow. Although his corpse has been buried and laid to rest in Daura in Katsina State, his name will forever be etched in the heart of Nigerians who experienced and lived through bittersweet 8-year administration that was fraught with his many unfavorable policies that impacted the lives of many Nigerians. And of course, in 2012, at the peak of cautious optimism in Nigeria's economy, a young Nigerian living in Bradford drove an hour to Manchester for a Standard Chartered Management training interview, a role based in Lagos. He didn't make it past the first round, not for lack of competence, but because he hadn't completed the NYSC yet. That was only 12 years ago. And yet, the idea that Nigeria once held such promise now sounds laughable to many young Nigerians today. In 2012, graduates returned home from the UK believing in a future here in Nigeria. Today, the same class of talent is stuck in remote jobs earning $500 per month, grateful just to be hired. Over that same decade, their Chinese classmates went on to explore Bangkok, Phnom Penh, and Jakarta, building wealth and freedom. Meanwhile, Nigeria, once an emerging economy story, has shrunk back from $568 billion in 2014 to under $200 billion today. And of course, the most damning part isn't the economic reversal, it's the Nigerians had to be convinced they were ever prosperous in the first place. So tonight, we ask a hard question that needs a fearless answer. And that is why I'm delighted to have two esteemed guests in the studio. Joining us live is David Hundeyin, an investigative journalist and established author. Great to have you join us on the issues.
Thank you for having me.
All right, it's a pleasure. And of course, here in the studio, we have Dr. Peter Nosike. Dr. Nosike is a philosopher, development economist, and best-selling author. Great to have you join us, Dr. Nosike.
Thank you for having me.
All right, I want to hit David first, definitely. David, you lived this experience. You effectively had become almost information resistant, incapable of recognizing cause and effect in their own political and economic history.
I think that would be sometime in 2014. So a bit of context here. So I returned to Nigeria in 2013. I spent a year doing my NYSC. So I served in Ekiti State, and I returned to Lagos in June 2014. So I started work. I resumed what became my permanent job then in October 2014. And I couldn't help but notice at the time, I was one of the, most of the people who worked with me were already confirmed. So they were making significantly more than I was. So at the time, the average in the office was between 160 to 200,000 naira a month, which was a significant sum of money then, if you compare the exchange rate. So that was in the region of $1,000+ a month. Even if you earn $1,000 a month in Nigeria right now, you'll be living pretty well. So you can imagine then in 2014. And these are people who, as far as I could tell, they were living the Nigerian middle class dream, if there's such a thing. These were all young people because it was a PR agency focused on youth market segments. So the oldest person among all my colleagues, I think, was 28 or so. I was 24. So the average age in the office was between 21 and 27. This is a very, very young team. And people were buying cars. People were shopping on a UK website called ASOS and, paying with their Nigerian debit cards from their bank accounts and having things delivered to them almost on a daily basis. People were doing all of these things. People were planning trips. If you've heard of a platform called Waka Now, it was very popular in my office at the time. Everybody was planning a trip, whether to Dubai or to Togo or somewhere or to Ghana. There was always something. Every month when salaries get paid, everybody's making the payments for this, that, or the other. Everybody was doing something, and you could still save money at the end of the month. Now, I wasn't making as much as they were earning because I hadn't been confirmed yet. I was still an intern. So I was making about 45,000 naira a month. But even with that, parents, and fortunately they had access to a car. But even with that 45,000 naira, I not spend that entire amount. And I was buying lunch at the office every day and everything. So it was clear to me that what I am witnessing here is, for lack of prosperity, people actually have disposable income. These are not people who were like me. They didn't come from abroad, right? These are people who schooled in Nigeria, born and raised, regular, ordinary Nigerians. They didn't come from particularly auspicious backgrounds. The people who just, their parents just worked hard, sent them to school. Maybe they went to Ogun State University or something. They were just ordinary people. And they got this job, and now they're buying cars. You know, they're traveling. They're going to places that they've never been to before. They're doing things. And it got so clear to me that you guys are having the time of your life. But concurrent to this, you would listen to the conversations these people are having in the office every day, and you would think that there was a war going on. Like Boko Haram was invading Allen Avenue. You would think like there was an economic depression going. It's just absolutely awful. And the only thing, the common theme running through everything that they had to say was that this government has to go. This government has to go. And, you know, I couldn't understand it, because I was coming, maybe I had the benefit of being a bit of an outsider. So I was coming from the outside in. The Nigeria that I had left in 2007 or 2008, when I went away to start my degree in the UK, was a very different Nigeria to the one I had met then. This was a much more prosperous place. I could see it visually. Everybody and their dog had a car. You know, it wasn't always like that, you know. So I couldn't understand it. What is this government that you people keep talking about? Oh, this guy has to go, this, that, and you'd always words and phrases. And over time, it started to become apparent to me, because, as I said, this was the PR agency, and we had sister agencies who were working in the same marketing communication space. And I became close to a few people who were working in and around what was then the as AP. It became clear to me this was organic. These people were repeating things that they had heard other people say. Nobody had actually questioned anything that they had heard. Nobody was actually saying any of these things out of any deep-seated sense of belief. It's just, I've heard this thing repeated around me, many apparent different sources, that it must be true. And despite the fact that my own lived experience directly contradicts the idea that I'm living through some sort of economic holocaust, I'm just going to keep on saying this thing. And again, it seemed very clear to me that, you know, once I had figured out that, okay, this is a political thing, and this is an attempt at basically changing this government, that's all it is. There's a political force behind this. Then, you know, it then became an issue of, okay, so if you're changing this government, right? At the time, the news had emerged, Nigeria had become Africa's biggest economy. The economy was doing things we had never seen it do before in our lifetime. You know, if you were born in the 90s like I was, you didn't get to witness the oil boom or anything. So this is the first time you were seeing visual prosperity in Nigeria in your life. So if you're going to remove this government, and then you were hearing of a certain Muhammadu Buhari, and I could not at the time perfectly, but I didn't understand it at the time. Where is this idea coming from? That he can even maintain the trajectory that you're on. Where is this idea coming from? And no one could ever answer that question. Again, that were behind what happened in 2015. What they did excellently well was that they figured out how to whip up Nigerians into a state of constant hysteria in a way that hasn't been accomplished since then. There was this wave of hysteria.
David, just to put you on the hold there, do you believe in the conspiracy that the Western powers had a hand in what happened in 2015? Coming from the Boko Haram, the Chibok girls kidnapped, and so on and so forth. Do you believe there was Western interference?
Well, I don't have to believe it, and it's not a conspiracy if the people involved have said so themselves.
Yeah, of course. So, we saw during the year.
Yeah, so I mean, I'm not even going to make mention of what Goodluck Jonathan himself said, because you can say, oh, that's just what he's saying because he lost the election, he's blaming it on other people. Let's look at what the Americans themselves have said. So the National Endowment for Democracy, which you may or may not know, is an organization that was cut out from the Central Intelligence Agency in 1983 by US President Ronald Reagan. And it's basically a regime change group. That's pretty much what it does. It's a regime change organization, right? It's the regime change department of the CIA, which was cut out of the CIA and spun off into this whole thing called the National Endowment for Democracy. They say very, very proudly and clearly on their website that in 2015, that they funded 30 different organizations that were involved in the Nigerian election. That is as good as a signed confession that we directly interfered in the election. Everybody knew that the election in 2015 was essentially a referendum on the performance of the incumbent, because that's what any election that is between an incumbent and a challenger, that's what it is. So where a foreign entity wants to interfere and swing the result a certain way, it doesn't take a genius to work out what it's going to do. If you want the challenger to take over from the incumbent, then what you are going to do is channel your funding toward organizations that deal with things like bringing out youth voters, registering new voters, because the incumbent already has a built-in advantage. If you don't interfere, the incumbent is going to win because the incumbent has that built-in advantage. So if you're trying to swing it the other way, that's what you do. You pour in funding into organizations that deal with, protecting the vote, youth empowerment, bringing out, encouraging people to come out to vote, and then you fund media as well. And they did that. So you may remember sometime around 2014, there was a very popular puppet show. It was called Ogas at the Top. It was a show that was dedicated to satirizing Goodluck Jonathan. Right now, this show, who funded it? And when you draw the line up far enough, you find that this show was funded by the Ford Foundation, which again, you may or may not know, is basically a CIA affiliate. Right. So you had US intelligence money interfering in so many different points, and it was all to the same direction, to demonize a particular candidate and to promote a certain guy as this, alternative with a halo around his head. So again, just to correct you, the use of the word conspiracy is a bit
these are no longer conspiracies. This is actual
these are documented facts.
Documented fact. Let me go to Dr. Anosi. Definitely, he is very rich in what has happened during our political era. And what do you think were the specific Buhari and Tinubu era decisions that brought us here?
The issue that Tinubu took a lot of Nigerians unaware. He started investing in the media as far back as 90s. Understand? And in the traditional media, the traditional media as from 2002 that worked against Jonathan in 2015. So they had all the media at their disposal. And what does media do? It shapes people's opinion. So Jonathan was presented as a demon. Then a lot of influencers like Wone Shoyinka, Aisha, Yusuf and others, it was anything but Jonathan. I remember when in a television interview, the current minister of Andake called the president of Nigeria that thing on a national television. So, and Jonathan was behaving like a gentleman, understand? Jonathan said that it is easier to wake up a man who is sleeping than somebody who is pretending to be sleeping. So Jonathan, I can say, was pretending to be sleeping when all these things were going on around him. And he couldn't stop it.
Was it that he was weak or he was handicapped?
Well, for me, I can say that he's a nice guy.
Not that he was weak.
I can say that's because if it's a Saraki Dixon or Anemesia, that would not have happened. Understand? So they saw Jonathan as a nice guy, and they took advantage of his because if it was a Tinubu that was in power in 2014-15, he would not have registered the APC. Understand? Which means that coalition would not have stood. But he was just going about as if on his well. And again, the Biden-Obama influence, the stage managed Chibok girls, understand me, that made his government to look bad. So invariably, Jonathan was the cause of his own failure.
Let me take this to David. Is this just economic incompetence, or is it a carefully maxed redistribution of national resources among a few? In short, was Nigeria robbed blind or just misled by fools?
So if you don't understand the geopolitical context, that question will confuse you, because for years I didn't understand it either, and I didn't understand what incentive does anybody who is a Nigerian head to oversee the destruction, the decimation of the Nigerian economy. If you do better, you make more money if Nigerians are prosperous, if the economy is growing. So I didn't understand that for years until I understood the geopolitical context that Nigeria existed in. So what a lot of us didn't understand at the time was that the fact that Nigeria's economy was growing, first of all, wasn't something that was happening in a vacuum. It wasn't just growing because, well, there's a decent president who has good policies and that's that. There was a context for that growth. First of all, Nigeria was an economic partnership with China. So an infrastructure partnership, a trade partnership, even a currency partnership with China. And as you know, China for many, many years now has been economy. Some also claim that it has already overtaken the US in PPP terms and has become the world's biggest economy outright. So basically, China's rising tide was lifting Nigeria's boat. Now, what a lot of us didn't understand was that the US State Department at the time saw this as a strategic threat to Nigeria's interest. Now, if you had to have told me this 10 years ago, I'd have scoffed at you. That, well, why would the US State Department care about what Nigeria does or doesn't do? Nigeria is not important to America. Nigeria is one tiny village compared to America. That's how many of us used to think. Until we became more educated on the subject and we came to the understanding that the US doesn't function as just a country. It sees itself as a global empire. It sees itself as the ruler of the world, as the ruler of the planet. And it's not in US foreign policy doctrine to accept the existence of what it calls a near peer rival. That's a country that is comparable to it in economic strength or in military strength or in industrial strength. It's not in US doctrine to talk about the so that it doesn't get another Russia or another China on its hands, because those are two countries which it absolutely cannot dominate because of the size of their defense capabilities. Nigeria was at the time was starting to enter a point in its development where it would have become very difficult within the US geopolitical ambit. Bear in mind that officially Nigeria is a non-aligned country like most of Africa, but as I'm sure you're aware, for most of Nigeria's post-independence history, it has been aligned with the US de facto, even though it hasn't been officially stated, but it's the US. So the increasing partnership between the Yar'Adua and the Goodluck Jonathan administrations especially was making it such that Nigeria was being taken out of America's geopolitical ambit and increasingly into the Chinese economic, political, and defense ambit, which the US considered unacceptable. So one of the goals of 2015, in addition to removing Nigeria from China's geopolitical ambit and returning it to the American fold, was also to ensure that the economic heft that Nigeria commanded, power that Nigeria commanded as the largest economy in Africa, with the capacity, the heft, size of Nigeria's economy in and of itself was considered to be a threat. And then you would ask, why is that? Why would a $500 billion economy be a threat to a 20 trillion? The simple reason, and they have said this themselves, and you don't have to take my word for it. You can Google something called the Kissinger report. That's National Security Memo 200, written in, I believe, it was 1976, under U.S. Secretary of State Henry Kissinger, where it states clearly that U.S. foreign policy doctrine for Africa is that it is a place that is a source for cheap raw materials, not just raw materials, but raw materials. And that if anything is to happen, which is to raise the prices of those raw materials, such as sustained population growth, which leads to industrial capacity in those, so those countries start to use their own resources for themselves and they're no longer selling it cheap. That anything that happens like that, increased industrial capacity, increased population, increased geopolitical power, is a strategic threat to U.S. national security interests, because the U.S. is dependent on cheap African resources for its industry. So not just African resources, cheap African resources. So where you have an African economy that, bear in mind, between 2017 and 2015, Nigeria's economy more than doubled. It went from about $274 billion in 2007 to about $568 billion as at the start of 2015. On that trajectory, it was predicted that by 2020, it's predicted to become Africa's first $1 trillion economy. When a country becomes a $1 trillion economy on the world's most resource-rich continent, you can imagine the knock-on effect that is going to have.
Yeah.
That country is going to become an industrial superpower. It's also going to become a military superpower. It's only a matter of time.
Yeah.
And when that happens, it controls these 54 African states, and it has less access to their cheap natural resources. And those resources start getting more and more and more expensive, which becomes a threat to the American-led world order. So again, that's the geopolitical context that Nigeria existed in 2015, which a lot of us, self-included, were just completely unaware of.
Wow, self-included. David, I will hold you on that one. Okay, Dr. Anosike, all of this was not even in the front burner. Nigerians didn't see it that way. Is it that they talking about the alleged interference was clearly thought out, well plotted, and at the end of the day, Nigerians, it looks like Nigerians were taken for granted or are taken for fools, robbed blind, and of course a corrupt administration succeeding the order. And we have heard that even the current president is an asset, where his document has. Are we still under siege as we are?
Well, whoever witnessed Buhari's administration in 1984, which I was in industry then, knows that Buhari, in economy, Buhari does not know anything. Economic-wise, Buhari did not know anything.
So could you say he was deliberately put there so that they could actually destabilize the economy and, of course, make sure they have a hold on the economy?
And even Obasanjo said that, because Obasanjo knew who Buhari is, because Buhari was his petroleum minister. So Obasanjo said that Buhari is not strong in the area of economy. Understand? But Tinubu strategically put him there for his own interest. Understand me? But if Tinubu is working with some Western powers, I cannot say. Because I don't like saying what I'm not too sure of.
Okay.
Understand?
But he's an asset. According to the information, we all remember the court case, the Chicago case, and so on and so forth.
I know that Barack Obama worked against the election of Goodluck Jonathan. And remember then, John Kerry was the Secretary of State. And John Kerry had a meeting with the 19 northern state governors, where he told them that Jonathan must not get another term. Understand me? So then the Chibok girl issue, which Michelle Obama was projecting to the outside community, which I know was a sabotage. against the administration of Jonathan. Because immediately Buhari, Jonathan was defeated, they bring back our girl stuff stopped. And even up till now, some of those girls are still there in the bush. So they worked hard to make sure that Jonathan did not get a second term. And that was from that point that Nigeria began to go down the drain. Because Buhari doesn't know anything economy. I witnessed his government as a head of state between 1st of January 1984 to August 1985 when he was booted out. And even the PTF, which Abacha appointed him as a chairman, it was a consortium, it was a consulting firm that ran the PTF, not him. That was why when 2.8 billion missed in PTF, he couldn't account for it because he wasn't in charge. So whoever knows Buhari will know that that Tinubu did a disservice to the country by imposing him on us.
All right, imposing, definitely. That's a very strong word. But let me go to David there. You caused an uproar when you tweeted on X that Nigerians are not capable of intellectual thought. And you compared public reasoning to a fish trying to fly. Brutal. But what patterns led you to that conclusion?
Again, I observe what's happening around me. I've mentioned my experience when I started working in 2014, and I would observe or just listen into the conversations happening around me in the office, because that was one of my favorite things to do. I wouldn't talk a lot. I would just listen and just try to get a feel for what's happening in the country, just a feel for the pulse on the ground. And there's this particular, I'm obviously not going to mention her name on air or her identity, but this was someone that I worked with at the time. This was someone who, she had gone to a private university in Nigeria, supposedly a very well-educated person, had finished with a second-class upper degree, was working, alongside me. And I remember one day someone asked her point blank that this Buhari of a thing, that you're so hell-bent on voting for this person, that Goodluck Jonathan has to go. Why exactly is it that you want to vote for Muhammadu Buhari? And this person looked us like square in the eye, eyeball to eyeball, and said, it's because Tinubu is my tribe man. Right? She was a Yoruba person, right? And the reason that answer stunned me more than anything else is not because that sort of sentiment is in short supply in Nigeria. It's not. But it's because of who was saying it, who had gone to, she attended Covenant University, right? This is one of the most expensive private institutions in the country, right? The tuition fees run into the millions. Right? You can't be a poor person and go to Covenant University. Definitely. So your parents have made that kind of investment into your education. You've come out, you've done your NYSC, so you've visited another part of the country. Your vistas are supposed to be wider. You've done all that, you've got a job, you're working with people in a multi-ethnic office. It's not as if this is an office where it's only Yoruba people that work there. There are people from all over the country who work there, right? And you open your mouth very proudly and say that the reason you are making an electoral decision is because the leader of the party that you want to vote for is from your tribe. And, there have been many sort of checkpoint incidents like that over the past 10 years where I've realized that, as much as we love to tell ourselves this myth that we are somehow very intelligent, where, Nigerians are this, Nigerians are that, it's actually not true at all. So Nigerians, by virtue of the sheer size of our population, we might have, compared to the rest of Africa, we might have a large number of high achieving people. But that's because the population of Nigeria is more than double the next most populated African country. So I think that inflates our self-image a lot, because there have been so many instances like this where I sit down and actually listen to people's thought process. And I realize that we are really nowhere near as a group, we're really nowhere near as bright or as intelligent as we think we are. The comment that sparked that tweet that you're referring to that I made was again, I'm not going to mention this person's name on air, but this person comes from the southeast. I believe he comes from Imo State, and this is not a poor person. This person is the tech founder. Hello.
Yes, we can hear you.
Yeah. So this is not a random person off the street. This is a tech founder. This person doesn't even live in Nigeria anymore. This person lives in Oxford in the UK. This is someone that I've met a couple of times. And after Buhari died, he sort of wrote like a eulogy. And he was saying that, well, he has been supporting Buhari since 2007, and he made all this effort on behalf of the man. And even in 2011, when there was a riot after the election and people died, and Buhari didn't issue a statement, that he was running Buhari's Facebook fan page, and he issued a statement purporting to come from Buhari, and that the media ran with it, and that's how much he invested into the Buhari thing. And that, even when people around him asked him, why is he so hell-bent on this, that, he thought and he still thinks that the alternative wasn't a choice. In other words, 10 years after 2015, this guy is still saying that even now, he still believes that choosing Muhammadu Buhari over Goodluck Jonathan in 2015 was the right thing to do, because Goodluck Jonathan wasn't a choice. And that statement really triggered me, because I thought to myself, in the intervening 10 years, the organization you were trying to build in Nigeria, it failed. You basically ran away from Nigeria. You moved to the UK. You got a global talent visa, whatever. You and your family now live there. You have a job there, right? So you were supposed to be a founder who could have become a millionaire or billionaire in Nigeria. The Nigeria that Buhari built for you destroyed your dream, and you went to the UK and became a salary earner there. So the other people suffered other things, but you also suffered things too. And even after all of that, after 10 years of evidence to the contrary, you still cannot get over your own ego and admit even to yourself that you saw things completely the wrong way. You made a mistake, or you misjudged, you made an error of judgment, or that your way of thinking is fundamentally flawed, and that you need to go back and re-examine how you analyze things. He couldn't do it. And even after I made that comment, he still came back and was still arguing. So that again, there are so many of these interactions that over time have convinced me that it's not as if Nigerians are sort of innately foolish or unintelligent people, but I believe that Nigerian education is structured in such a way that the ability to critically examine and think things through in logical sequence is not a skill that is taught to us. If you have that skill, then that means you learned it on your own. Or you didn't come up with the Nigerian system. Because what the Nigerian system does, and I know this because I've been through the Nigerian educational system too, is that it teaches you to learn by rote. It teaches you to memorize things. It teaches you to commit things to memory, and then to mislabel the ability to memorize things and to speak plenty of memorized English as intelligence. That's not intelligence. That's just memory.
David, that's really harsh. And I know Nigerians who are watching definitely will feel some kind of pinch with those punchy and hard words coming from you.
They should.
Yeah, Dr. Enosige, how hard has David really hit Nigerians today? Because he has just said Nigerians are not really that intelligent like we think. Because, we still see people who are myopic ethnically. I think I saw a post where a local government is making plans to change the names of their street because they are from one ethnic background to their own ethnic background. Forgetting that a lot of people are even in Lagos and not originally Lagosians, but they control Lagos. But nobody is telling them to go back to the various states they come from in the Southwest.
Well, for me, I feel that we have a foundational problem. We have foundational problem, and that's why we are the way we are. As David said, we don't do a lot of critical thinking in Nigeria. We reason that's on the surface. We reason on the surface, and that is why Buhari became our president. Because Tinubu was able to use the media to manipulate the mind of those who were not born in the 80s and witnessed Buhari's military government.
So we're not good students of history.
I say, one, they don't teach history anymore in Nigerian schools. It was stopped. Buhari was quoted as saying that he was a changed Democrat. Buhari never told anybody that he has changed. It was the media that was projecting Buhari as being a messiah. Understand me? And everything that the Lagos about the press projected with over Buhari failed, because as we speak, Tinubu is invested more in the media more than any other person living in the country. Understand? He's into radio, he's into television, he's into newspapers. Understand? And his TV station at that's Echo. This is more than Alja Zara. Understand? So he saw this thing early enough, borrowing from what the Tribune did for Obafemi Awolowo. But other people couldn't, did not see what he saw, understand me? So he was able to influence on the mind of those who don't read. So Nigeria, a lot of Nigerians are not into critical thinking. So, and that's a problem.
That is a problem coming from Dr. Peter Anosike. Definitely marrying ideas with David on this, talking about position. But let's wrap it up, because definitely I would like to wrap up with this information that talking about a professor of journalism and emerging media at Kennesaw State University, Farouk Berogi, has alleged that Aisha was no longer married to the late former president Muhammadu Buhari. Berogi made this claim in a post on his verified Facebook page on Wednesday. Talking about a lot of situations around even the Buhari thing. Even people have asked, is that the Buhari that was buried? So on and so forth. So many theories, left, right, and center. What do you make of all of this, David? Before we go.
I guess the only thing I can say is, honestly speaking, who cares? Because what that story and others are lied to it. Oh, there was one Jubilee from Sudan who is the person that was actually, all that these things serve to do is serve as a distraction. Because the real issue is whether there was a Muhammad Buhari in office, or there was a Jubilee, or there was a clone from outer space, or there was a giant lizard wearing the Buhari suit, whatever it was, what did that thing or that person do in office? That's all I'm interested in. What trajectory was the country set on that is still on now and is still nosediving? Those are the things that are important. So what people like, with all due respect to Prof. Farouk Berogi, what people like that do when they put stories like that out is that they take people's energies and they misdirect it. So there are so many people who want to know, oh, is there any truth to the rumor that Buhari died in 2017 and they got some, actor to act? Who cares? Not important. The real story is that regardless of who was or was not in office, this is what happened to Nigeria in 2015, and that under no circumstances, if Nigeria had a population that had the most basic media literacy and critical thinking ability and historicity, that is not a thing that would have ever happened, right? Because as at 2015, Nigeria was part of a development bloc of 4: Mexico, Indonesia, Nigeria, and Turkey. Three of the 4 have gone on to become $1 trillion economies and superpowers in their own right. Nigeria is the only one that turned around and went all the way back down. Its economy has more than halved, right? So that is where the real conversation is. Not whether Aisha Buhari was married to the person that they buried, or whether the person that they buried wasn't the person they said he was.
A lot of distraction, yeah. Some have said that propaganda and distraction have been a major. Nobody's even asking about the refineries, what happened. Nobody's asking about the dollar for Naira crude. A lot of information are always being distracted all of the time. But beyond the anger and satire, what still gives you hope? Just in 1 minute, so that we can wrap it up.
What gives me hope is that there are over 200 million Nigerians. So where there are that many people, and whether we like it or not, they have, in some way, shape, or form, they have access to information, they have access to the internet, they have access to conversations like this. Inevitably, we don't know when it will happen. I hope it happens soon, or it may happen within our lifetime. We don't know. But inevitably, at some point, there will be a tipping point, because there are too many people in existence who are going through too much suffering at the same time for this to be sustainable. So eventually, it's either there's going to be a mass extinction event and there won't be Nigerian people anymore, or they are going to turn around and finally face their problems.
All right. What's going to be pushing Nigerians to the wall and pushing back?
Well, for me, our elasticity is unlimited. Understand? When you push Nigerians to the wall, they don't bounce back. They want to melt through on the wall and begin to work as if nothing happened. So, and that's as a result of our foundation. We never struggled for independence. So struggling is not in our DNA. That is one of our biggest problems.
Really sad. I want to thank you very much, David, for being a part of the issues. It's a pleasure having you. And of course, we'll keep it a date some other time to bring you on. And of course, a lot to still talk about.
Thank you for having me.
All right. Dr. Anosike, it's also a pleasure having you.
Thank you for having me.
All right. Tonight, we peeled back more than policies. We dug into the wiring of a nation's mind. And what we found was both tragic and urgent. A shrinking economy, yes, but even more dangerously, a shrinking curiosity. People were taught to memorize, but not to question. To worship leaders, but not interrogate their failures. We thank David Hundeyin and Dr. Anosike for refusing to sugarcoat what needs surgery. Until next time, think deep, act bold, and question everything. This is The Issues. I am Jerry Apeliohai. Thanks for watching.